and hear what we're about.
Welcome back to Armor Radio. Josh here with Dusty.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Our special guest today, Tony Gray.
Hello.
Tony is from Core Fitness. Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here. And I
Tony,
appreciate it.
tell us a little bit about your journey in fitness, where you started at, where you went to, and how you've got to being here on the podcast on Armor Radio.
All right. Well, I guess before we go there, let me kind of give you a little warning, a little heads up first. Two things you need to know about me, very important. Number one, I'm not smart. Okay, so
Okay.
there's going to be times in this
That's not
hour
true.
you're going to say, "Wow, why did you do that?" or "What made you think to do that?" That's number one. Number two, I've raging ADD.
Got it.
And so I just want to give you the forecast, right? You guys are flying the plane. I want to make sure that you know what weather is coming ahead and everything like that. So you may have to guide me back to whichever topic.
Well said. We will
Yeah.
do that. We will do that for sure.
And Dusty, I think you can relate a little bit, right?
Yeah, slightly.
Okay.
That's why we have Josh.
Yeah.
I'll steer the ship. I'll
Okay.
steer the ship. You tell us where you started at, and you tell us how you got here.
Yeah. So this goes way back. So this would be starting in around 1996 in the industry.
Okay, that is way back. Yeah.
So I just graduated from college, and I moved out from Texas to California. And life had brought me out there, and I was originally going to go into forensics. And I was very naive at that time, and I thought, oh, you just show up with your degree, and they're like, yeah, you get a job, and you're hired, and everything. And so they said, long story short, the process to even begin to interview or get hired was going to be at least a year. And so I thought, wow, I just moved out here. I got no job. What am I going to do? And
so you were all in. You
Oh,
just no job, moved out. Wow. Okay, that's bold.
remember the not smart part?
Oh, yeah.
Just went out. I was like, I'll figure it out.
Checking boxes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, got it.
So there was a gym there. I thought, well, I love working out. I had been certified. I'd been doing some training while I was in college. I was like, I'm just going to get a job here as a trainer just until this thing lines up.
Okay.
And in every interview I had, I was like, even said really dumb things like, well, I'm just here till I get my real job, or like something like that, like things that interview.
Really showing commitment.
Yes. Yeah. Things that interview people really want to hear, And so luckily, despite all that, they still hired me. And I started working as a trainer. And it was a really interesting timeline because that time in California, there hadn't really been the boom of like the big chains. There was some old time chains that were still around, like Bally's and some other things like that. But the evolution of like this big corporate fitness structure was really starting to take off again. And the coolest thing about that time was that the first month that I worked in this gym, it was called Family Fitness, Ray Wilson Family Fitness. And then like a month later, they gave me a new shirt and it said 24-hour fitness. And I was like, oh, wow, this is weird. I didn't know anything about big business acquisitions or anything like that. But what had been going on behind the scenes is that there was a pioneer, a guy in the industry. His name is Mark Mastroff. Probably one of the most famous, most influential, one of the best leaders I've ever been around, and just a true visionary. And he was a guy who had the story of working in a gym, borrowed some money to buy that gym, borrowed some money to buy another gym, and just organically started growing it from literally one location. It was called 24-Hour Nautilus.
Okay.
And up in the Bay Area, right?
Okay.
So over a period of time, this has been going on long before I ever showed up, but the grassroots were starting to grow and starting to come together. And he put together a financial package, and from Northern California, he bought the chain that I was working at.
Okay.
And so though they merged, and that became the birth of 24-Hour Fitness, which isn't as famous now at this timeline, but in the early 2000s up to like 2010, it was the largest gym chain in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Global.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I started out there just as a trainer, and remember, I'm not even thinking I'm going to stay here. I'm thinking, I'm going to go into my real job. And he came, and some of the people came, and they brought the vision of what they wanted to do with the company. And I think at that time, with the merger, I want to say it was like around 40 or 50 locations.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, wow, this is pretty cool. And he came and presented, and that was my first time to really see like a true entrepreneur, visionary type of person. And I remember at that moment going, hey, I want to see what's going to happen here. I'm at least I went from going like, hey, I'm not going to be here to at least I want to check out, see what's going to happen here. So I stuck around, and over time I started getting promoted. I went from fitness trainer to assistant fitness manager, and then eventually fitness manager, and then working my way up. But kind of long story short, to tie that one all in together, at the point in time when I left that company, we had 450 locations. I had traveled on behalf of that company to China. I had been to South America. I had been all over the United States. And so that all happened in about a 5-year window of going from trainer to management. And then eventually I worked my way up into the education department. And my last role in that company was director of education for all of training for all of 24 Hour Fitness.
That's a busy 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a busy 5 years. Now, what did you go to after that? So if you grew that company all the way, how do you transition out of that?
Yeah, no. So one of the guys that I met there in that journey had wanted to do it for himself, wanted to create his own gym chain. And there's really, really good things about a massive company like that. But there's also a lot of challenges, right? When you get that big and there's that many layers and there's that many things going on. So I think I was intrigued with the idea of starting back at zero and wanting to have more control, wanting to have more like a way to do it. And so he had done market research, and there was a lot of non-compete situations with the contracts to leave that company to come start a new company. We were very limited in like the parts of the country that we could go. And so yeah, he's the owner of that company started doing his research around year 99, 2000. And he picked Knoxville. And I swear to this day he said Nashville, which was I was like, oh, cool. And then I moved here, and I was like, wow. And this is before Turkey Creek or anything existed here. I'm like, oh my.
What year was this? So this would have been like early 2000s?
Year 2000. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I was graduating high school.
Yeah. And he just called me old if you didn't catch on to that. Right
subtle.
There.
It was subtle.
Very
though.
subtle.
It was very
It's
subtle.
like,
Yeah.
This guy's old.
What was this company called? Like, what did you guys
Rush
name this?
Fitness Complex.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember the Rush. Okay.
Yeah. So we came out here, not one member, not one location, not one anything. And of course, we were labeled the crazy people from California, like came out here to, that's what our competitors would call us.
You started the Rush.
Yes.
So when you came, how many people came like to come do that?
There was like 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you came out here specifically because you had a non-compete with 24 Hour Fitness,
Yep.
that this was really the only...
Yeah, it was like here. There was a couple areas in North Carolina, upstate New York.
Was the first one in like Alcoa-ish, Maryville?
No, the first one
Okay.
was at Walker Springs.
Okay.
Yeah, Walker
Okay.
Springs, and the one I don't know if the mall's still even here, but East Town Mall. Yeah.
I think they tore it
I think
down.
it's tore down.
It tore down. Yeah. So those were the first 2. We actually did 2 at the same time.
Wow.
And those were the first 2. And and that was just an incredible time to be like in a lot of cases, like where you guys are right now with Armor, one location, but you have vision, you have ideas, you have things you want to do. And so, yeah, we started running the play, and we realized too, like, how hard it is from the start, from the ground up, like joining that other company at the, yes, there was a massive trajectory, but a lot of the things were already in play and already going.
Yeah.
This was like, you had to start from zero. No one ever heard of our name. Well, there was no name until that day, right?
Yeah.
No one knew us. No one knew anything. And then, and so, yeah, we started. And
man, how scared were you to go from 400 and some doing all the things to 0 in a new spot?
Yeah, it's one of those dueling emotions, right? Very scared, but also very excited.
Okay.
And there's a lot of times when I think back to that early days, and I don't know if you guys have ever had this, but like when you're going through times that are really challenging, does it seem like it was darker back then or something, like less days of sunlight or something? I don't know what it was, but yeah, I moved here and I left San Diego in December. You know,
Well, maybe that's why. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, on
I
the
know.
coast,
Okay.
and then
San
maybe
Diego
that's
to
why.
Knoxville. I can
Yeah,
see how
maybe
that
that's
seems
why.
dark.
But San
And
Diego does have the
January.
haze, right? I guess they
Yeah.
got the blue haze, so that's
January, February, like the coldest months.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
picked quite a
Darkest
time of it.
months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, the people here were incredible. The response from the community, from the people. I think one of the reasons that this was a really, really good fit for us is that we were bringing, at that time, a really progressive approach to fitness. And that really wasn't here. There was like a lot of mom and pop type situations.
What was the progressive approach as it differed from 24-hour?
It was very similar to 24-hour, but it was very different than
Than
what was
anything
going
that was
on
here.
here.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So instantly,
Is that because Knoxville was just behind in fitness at the time?
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
kind of helped launch it into what it is today.
yeah. I mean, and all the team was incredible, and the people that joined, and it's so weird now because that chain, we grew that to 23 locations,
Okay.
and we had venture capital partners and everything like that. We were in a way positioned to do something similar to what was going on with 24-hour fitness, but sometimes there's things that go on behind the scenes that, at least in the field, none of us had control over, and the venture capital group decided to sell that company. And so from there, when I look back at it, though, in the growth from 2001 is when we actually opened until around 2014, I think, is when those were sold. And 22 locations. We spread across Knoxville, Chattanooga, Greensboro, Asheville, South Carolina. I mean, it was awesome. It was an incredible run. One of the most things I'm the most proud of, and all of the great people that were part of that is and so even to this day, like if I'm out somewhere, I'll run into somebody, either an old member, or somewhere, and they'll go, "Man, that was great gyms, man. Those were awesome," and like all this stuff like that. So it still has in some way a legacy. Each year that goes by, though, it gets a little further away. But yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what point during that time, so like 2000 to 2014, did the venture capitalists when did that change?
Right around 2007, 2008.
And so then how much did that have an impact on like just the operational aspects of the business and like the culture?
Yeah. So hindsight, I think it was a combination of things. Like on the good end, we had resources now. We had revenue. We had money to go and open gyms and even to be a little more elaborate. So one of my roles there was I bought all the equipment that went in every gym, right? So I got to know all the different manufacturers, everything that was going on. And the ownership group was very supportive of me. They were always like, "Hey, try to get the best deal you can or whatever, but more importantly, get the best equipment that you can. We don't want you to go cheap because we want it to be all about the experience." And that was the thing. If you went back and you looked at any of the reviews or any of the things that people ever said about that chain, one of the things was always about how cool the equipment was and how the variety and all the different stuff that we had. And so, for about 10 years there, I would go to the trade shows, and I was like a rock star kind of, because they want to go, who's the guy that's got the checkbook, basically, right? Yeah. And I had the support from the company. So on that end, it was really positive. From a cultural standpoint, though, when you grow that quickly, it can be very difficult to keep that culture and to keep the level of talent of people that you have, right? Because normally maybe somebody would be an assistant manager for 2 years or 3 years before they got their shot. So they would learn the business really well, and then they could become a general manager. When we're opening clubs that quick, we'd have people where they've been assistant manager maybe 3 months. And then we had to thrust them into a position because we had to staff it, or we had to, and so from a cultural standpoint, I think it does get watered down when you grow that quickly.
Yeah.
And of course, and we were spreading out too. So we were having to go into markets where we didn't know people. We bring someone from here to get it up and running. But then, ultimately the idea was to staff it from local people and everything like that. But all in all,
So you lose a bit of the continuity across the line because
Yeah.
you're rushing it a little bit to get the next door open.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was to, on that end, I think on some level was to keep the venture capital. I think that goes back to your original part of the question. They wanted to, their job is to grow the company, increase the value of the company, and then eventually
But
when
your
they sell
job
the
is
company-
quality.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a conflict in there.
Yeah.
And what happened at 2014 when
Yeah.
you sold it?
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So I was transitioning right at that point where having that feeling of like, man, because even going from, well over 400 locations to 22 locations. And then I was like, man, I just want to do something simple for a while. And so my wife and a very good friend of ours, we opened up a CrossFit gym. And he was primarily running the CrossFit. And I was running what we called Athletes RX, which was our first venture into like youth sports training, sports performance, stuff
Okay.
like that for kids.
Were you running that out of the same place?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, out of that same place. We had also partnered with one of the volleyball clubs in town, and then I had also started taking that on the road as we started picking up high school teams. So we would either train them at our facility or at their facility
Okay.
at the high school. And then my wife, she really was the brains of the operation, going back to the not smart thing that we talked about.
Right. Right. Surround yourself with good people.
Right?
Right.
Yes, let that be one of the morals to the story right here.
Yep.
Yeah. And we were a couple years in, really cool time in life. Like literally we got to know every single member. You guys know how it is when
Yeah.
you're in a facility like that.
Do you remember how many? So can you give me the average number of your membership base at a Rush, and then how many did you have at your CrossFit
shoot.
affiliate?
Yeah. So say Walker Springs, for example,
Yep.
or because that was always like a flagship one. We had one in North Carolina called Brassfield that was epic. I mean, unbelievable facility. Those would have somewhere in the like 7,000 to 9,000 member range.
Wow.
Yeah. And then at our facility, we probably were around 300, 350, somewhere around there, of the like consistent members. And then we had hundreds of kids coming in and out, different parents coming in and out, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
A CrossFit affiliate with 300 is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a considerable number.
It
A
is,
lot
yeah.
of them bank out at 150.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome
And,
job.
and I think that, having the different programs in there helped,
yeah.
because like sometimes it could be a parent would come and join because their kid was part of our program or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, we had kind of our silos, like she ran the business and he ran the CrossFit and I was running we called it Athletes RX. That was the name of our brand for that. Yeah. And,
That's pretty rare in and of itself with CrossFit. Usually you get the very, very passionate one person that does all of the things.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you brought a lot of intelligence on, like your wife did this did this,
Yeah.
and you even call it a silo.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
knew what you were good at
Yeah.
instead of just the one guy who really likes the fitness part of it, and then he tries to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
So that was you probably get to carry over a lot of what you've already done into that,
Yeah.
and then get those people around you.
yeah, no, definitely. And everyone did teach coach some classes here and there. That was part of our thing that we would do. And I would tell you, like most people, they would probably tell they loved my wife's class. They thought, man, she's the best coach you guys got. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. And so yeah, that was all really cool, and that was a really awesome timeline, and an opportunity to kind of reset. Because I felt like, man, since 1996 all the way to 2014, like I've been going just hardcore and usually trying to fulfill someone else's passion, right? Their vision for their industry or whatever. And definitely great experiences and everything like that. But it gave me a chance to kind of reset. We had the facility, and then I was branching off doing consulting for other kind of smallish gym chains that were wanting to grow. And so, I would get hired, come out and try to kind of guide them through that process and guide
Like a
them through-
mentorship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is venture capital right for you? Is it right for you now? Maybe in the future, whatever it could be. But yeah, just consulting, and traveling all over the country and And so where that kind of led me to was getting to know a lot of different gym owners. And, then the next kind of feasible thing that would come up was like, well, what do I need to get new equipment?
And then that's what took you to Core Fitness.
Eventually, yeah.
Okay.
There was
Okay.
a little bit of a time gap right there. But one thing that I think is really cool, or a cool story about the Athletes RX program, was that, we started running it out of that facility, and then, and like I said, we had partnered with some great people at the volleyball club, and then a lot of those coaches coach at the high schools, and so we picked up relationships with them. But one of the coolest things was that the way that we could develop relationships with the athletes, right? And so a lot of them, I mean, shoot, some of them we started with, they're 12 years old, 13, 14, all the way up through high school, and then even into college, right? And they come home from summer and still train with us and do all that kind of stuff. And then as the business kept going on, sometimes like full circle, they would come back and become part of our staff.
Oh,
So
wow.
a kid that maybe started with me when she or he was 16, they played all through college, and then they came back, and that was awesome, because talk about like I don't even need to train them how to do the job, because they've been in my system now for years.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they could pick up, and they knew what our expectations were, and they knew what our culture as a program was, and like what our expectations were. And so it really helped me kind of keep that momentum going.
Yeah.
From consistency and everything like that. But probably the two biggest takeaways from that timeline that I'm the most that I like is that, one is that I was able to coach my own daughter. Okay, so she went through our system. She started when I had her for 12 to 14, and then I had her after that in college. So ended up doing the training for her for the first 2 years of her college team. And I would always tell, like, hey, I know it's not easy being a coach's kid, but like she handled it incredibly well, and was like ultimately became, kind of leader as part of that team. And then just this last summer came back full circle to help me with one of the younger teams.
That's really rare when you talk to a lot of parents. That's not the way it goes.
Yeah.
What do you recommend to preserve that relationship and to make it that good?
Oh gosh.
What's some of the key advice or the features that you use to move forward with that?
Man, I don't know. I think a big part of it was that she started in the system, and so she saw the strength of the relationships that I had with some of the older kids. And then she could see that process of like a kid that was maybe 3 years ahead of her, going through our system, and then going off to playing college, and then coming back home and being around. You know what I mean? And
So it sounds like you helped to have her recognize the delayed gratification of do this today and this could be tomorrow, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
And it sounds like communication. I mean, it sounds like you said this is going to be hard, like right out of the gate, instead of letting it be a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was always the culture of the program, was that like we were going to work hard, and even going to the point like every kid when they were about to leave and go off to whichever college team they were going to go play for, we had a little tradition where we'd take them out to dinner and do stuff like that and talk to them, and then I'd always carve out like about 10 seconds, and I'd go, hey, look, wherever you go, you need to go and dominate from day one. Like you go in there and take names. Like, don't walk. I know you're a freshman. You walk in there and take names. And then they would, right away I would have players call me after like the first week of workouts, and they call me up and they go, I won every drill. And they were going against 22-year-old, 23-year-old kids, right? And then I would say like, man, that is so awesome.
That is.
Yeah.
That is. That sounds a lot like you pouring into them and you having good communication, and then a step above what most coaches do.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of different times too, where I got to know their family. I got to know so many things that were going on with them, and they knew that it wasn't just about their athletics or whatever school they were going to go to or whatever. It was always first about our relationship, and like they knew that.
Do you find that part's kind of fallen away today? I mean, this was 2014 is when you sold Rush. So what year was this thereabouts?
This has been running really. It's been kind of ongoing all the way. It's still current.
Yeah.
But really the peak of it was around 2018, 2019.
Do you feel like it's still like that, or do you feel like some of that's fallen away, but obviously what you do is preserved, but you don't see as much of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things about it was that it was never like our primary business or our primary livelihood. So I was always able to keep it like as a passion project all the time.
You did it because you like really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You weren't doing it to necessarily pay the bills.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then in that, you could definitely make the decisions that benefited the athletes instead of that maybe had to benefit a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big deal.
And then I always felt, fresh about it. I always felt like passionate, excited about it, wanted to do it.
It wasn't a grind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then though, you do lead me to like a really interesting part of that when you said to pay the bills, because there became a really impactful part of my life happened just right around that timeline. And I'll try not to get choked up here, man. It's hard stuff. So during the peak of all of that, when everything was rocking and rolling and we were running with the Athletes RX, I had been at a church service, and this young lady was there speaking about a nonprofit that she was part of. And so I sat there and I was like listening, just like, everybody. And then I felt like a nudge. The Holy Spirit told me, like, you need to help them. I was like, man, I don't even know what that means. So I listened, and we got in the car, and I told my wife, I was like, man, I felt like the Holy Spirit tell me, like, I need to help them. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know how I could help them. But it seemed in that moment really captivating, right? Well, then a couple days go by, 3 days, a week goes by, and you get busy and you get distracted and life goes on, right? Mm-hmm. Then a year later, the same person comes and speaks again. And all of a sudden it hit me like, dude, that was a year ago. And you were told to do something. But I came up with excuses and just got distracted and got busy. I didn't do anything. So next year we get in the car and I tell my wife, man, I really need to do something about that. And she's like, and Dusty knows her. She's like, well, are you going to do something or are you going to talk about it? And I was like, well, I just caught a stray right here, right? Like, I'm trying to do something nice, whatever. And she goes, yeah, you could talk about it all day long, but that's not going to help anybody. That's not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then I started coming up with kind of like the excuse, wow, man, I don't know anything about a nonprofit. I don't know how to run all that. Just some time went by and everything. And then I felt the nudge again, like out of nowhere, unrelated. Because the other two times it was in that like service where she was at. Yeah. This time I was just driving down the road. And it was like, hey, I'm telling you to do something. I was like, oh, gosh. So I remember I thought about it that night, and the excuse kept coming up. I don't know what to do, and I don't even know anything about a nonprofit. And so the next day, I happened to be helping out with a gym project that was going on in the old city. And the person that was supposed to be working that day called, and they were like, hey, could you fill in for me today? I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be down there. So I went down there. Young lady walks in, literally the next day. Young lady walks in, and she says, oh, yeah, I've been meaning to come down here. And I was like, cool, well, yeah, let me show you around, all this stuff, everything like that. I show her the gym. And she's like, no, someone's been telling me to come down here. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. I don't know what to tell you, but I'm glad you're here. Let me show you around, right? And then finally, I said, where do you work? And she goes, I work right down the street. We're a company that helps people do nonprofits.
That's pretty big. Yeah.
And I went, oh, man.
It's time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think about God, you can't, there's no more excuses, no more anything. So I said, I think I know why you're here. I think I know why you were told to be here. And so I asked her a lot of questions, and I told her about what we were trying to do and everything like that. And so she did an amazing job. She set me up in the right direction based on the size of our organization, like what we were doing. But from that point on, what we did is all of our revenue that we generated through that program has gone to donation, gone to...
through the Athletes RX program?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have just our regular costs and staff. Any of the kids that come and train and help, I mean, we pay them and everything like that. But everything after that has gone to donation. And so, and that's part of one of the really cool things is that when you guys took over Armor, you know, you let us keep that thing going.
Yeah.
So Armor lets us do, you know, our thing here, and we do that.
Yeah.
So
You were the very first conversation of when I came in, of people that Dustin said, these are a few people I think that you really need to like carve out some time and talk to, and you were like at
wow, well, cool.
number one or number two, and then you basically told me that story.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
how do you,
Yeah.
you can't help but like want to get involved in that.
Now, where do the donations go?
Yeah, so different organizations over different periods of time. At that time, when we first started, really awesome organization called Street Hope.
Okay.
And Street Hope works with human trafficking, and that was the young lady that had come out and talked to us. And then since then, there's been other organizations. One that I'm really high on right now that I think is really good is called Grow Free in East Tennessee, and it's a nonprofit that is kind of links in some things that have to do with trafficking, but also involved in foster care and also involved in other organizations like that. So yeah, mainly between trafficking, foster care situation, anything along those lines has been the programs that we've been behind. But I've looked into a bunch. So anybody who's hearing this, if this is something like, hey, and even if it's not money, if it could be time, it could be energy, it could be whatever, if they want to reach out, you know, that's one of the things I like to help people with, is understand what's important to them. Because if it's really important to you, then you're gonna keep trying to find ways to be more helpful. You know.
Yeah.
So.
Is there a criteria that you look for? So like anybody that might be listening to it,
in
like
an organization.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of details. Probably we want to steer just specifically with them when it comes to whatever one they want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically if we just say, hey, start with your passion. What are the things that you want to get behind? And then from there you could start looking into things that are associated with that. Yeah.
Is it event based? Will you do? Do you try to have events for them?
Yeah.
Do you try to actually, you know, I can just off the top of my head, I can think of 5Ks and stuff like
Yeah.
that, or you can think of, you know, CrossFit competitions is
Yeah.
a big one, stuff like that.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. And in fact, there's one coming up that Lucas, you know, because your guy Lucas here,
Yeah.
you know, and he's an amazing guy, and you know, when he did that fundraiser and he did 1,000 burpees,
Yeah.
I told him, like, dude, I'd rather you punch me 1,000 times than I do 1,000 burpees, right? and that's a perfect example of, like, if you're gonna put yourself through something like that, you better believe on what's on the other side of that.
Yeah.
You know, of
Yeah.
1,000 burpees, right?
Yeah.
So I can't take credit for this. I didn't make this up. One of my favorite people ever, a guy named Vince Martin, kind of a legend around here in the Knoxville area. Way back in the old days, we used to train together, and once a year we would do a mile of lunges. And I'll just tell you, I'll tell you two things. It's not as bad as it sounds that day, the next day. Okay. And it's not really about lunges. It's about up here, right?
Yeah.
Can you just keep putting one foot in front of the next?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I happened to be talking to Lucas about his 1,000 burpees and everything. And then he kind of said, like, hey, I want to know what to do next. And I was like, well, man, we've done this thing like probably 6 or 7 times over the years. I think it's a worthy challenge. I think it'd be something you'd want to do. And instantly he's like, I'm in. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so, that was going to be a future conversation with you guys.
Yeah.
What's the best way to promote it? What's the best way to do it? And what would be the best way to where any member here could raise money and it could go to whichever organization they want. Mm-hmm. Or we could have a standard one that it could go towards either way.
Sounds like this is the start of that conversation.
Right.
Yeah, well, it kind of just happened, right?
Yep. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So you would have the mile full of lunges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every step is a lunge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you recruit other businesses to come in and maybe say sponsor So, hey,
no,
man,
that's
if
what I
you-
would like to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe businesses listening to this could say, I'll
wanna
sponsor
get
you.
involved.
And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So before Lucas and talking and everything like that, that event has always just been wackos that wanted to get together and do it.
Yeah.
And
For a
then
cause.
yeah, and then I'm like, hey, let's take it one step further, and especially after what Lucas did, and I thought, let's do it. And I've mentioned it here to about 10 people so far at Armor, and I've said like, hey, so what do you think? And here's the coolest part: if I see you doing lunges on the turf, like you've already told me you're in. You don't know that yet.
Yeah.
But I'm like, so you like lunges? And then they look at me like, why is this guy asking me if I like lunges? And they're like, yeah. And then I'm like, you want to do a good cause? You want to get involved in it? And so, yeah, I think we could launch that from here and do really well with it. And so note to all the members out there, if you see me walking around, either don't do lunges or be
ready to be doing a mile of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So normally at this point I say, hey, so are you guys in?
We're in, man.
Let's
Yeah.
do it.
All right.
Yeah. Mile of lunges.
All right. There you go.
Okay. So how would we? So if we have our mile of lunges set up, how would you be able to dedicate where that my donation would go, or the donation that the sponsors would go? What
Yeah.
would be the opportunities for that? How would we allocate that?
Yeah, there's I mean, you can keep it as simple as you want, which is like a lot of times where I've done in the past is I've just told the people make the check directly out to that organization.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
And then we just collect them, and then for years with Armor was a meeting before I knew you guys and before you were here. Armor was a meeting spot where people would come and I would have their checks for them, and then we would hand it to them.
So roughly, how many lunges are you talking about in a mile?
Well, so that your height and your leg.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's variables.
Yeah. So it's gonna be
Is it
in the
1,128 steps in a mile? Somebody Google that. Where's the Google guy?
Well,
I think that's steps.
Get our tech guys on that.
Yeah, that's steps. I'm probably way off, but I thought it was.
It
like
takes me
1,000,
around
so.
1,500 lunges to do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So
So
then
it
it's
could
probably-
even be a situation where you try to get people to pledge
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's
like,
what I was trying to
you know,
get to that.
a $1 a step or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's some creative ways to
Absolutely.
raise some funds.
Yeah. Yeah.
2,000 lunges.
I mean, I think that
or
would be an
2,000
amazing
steps?
goal.
2,000 steps
Is
in
if
a
you
mile.
can get,
So about 1,500 because your lunge is probably a little bit more of a gate step than
get
okay.
participants
Yep.
to
Okay.
Yeah.
maybe have people come alongside them pledging a certain amount of money to.
Yeah. Come. So normally, we've done it in a bunch of different places, but a lot of times I like to pick like a turf football field.
Yep.
And so if you start on the goal line on one end, and you go all the way through the end zone on the other end, and then you come back, right? It's just 8 of those.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound
Just
bad.
8.
Yeah.
Just 8.
Yeah.
Just 8. Yeah.
It's all
I think
about
we can do that.
mindset, Tony.
Yeah. I think we can do that.
Yeah.
So for
And-
anybody listening, we're looking for sounds like we're looking for
We're
a
looking for
football
a few
field.
Yeah, I
good
just-
men and women who.
And a football field. Yeah. I've
and
used Farragut a bunch of times.
Okay.
That's been a good one. The turf definitely helps because we do challenge you to like touch every rep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the turf helps. And so, yeah, I mean, going back to that was a timeline in life between the athletes program and consulting. And then, yes, that led to the next thing of where people were wanting to know about equipment and everything like that. And all my years at the Rush, being the buyer, I knew all the different suppliers that were out there and like what they had going on. And really interesting that my rep from Core was the only guy that stayed in touch with me when I was no longer a big buyer. I mean, because I would spend anywhere between $2 and $4 million a year in fitness equipment.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that was spread out amongst multiple suppliers and everything like that. And once it's kind of like, oh, you're no longer the guy.
This one
Everybody
guy stayed
just-
in contact.
Yeah. Even though I had nothing, and even
You couldn't give anything to him.
Huh.
There's
No.
no financial gain for him.
right.
That's cool.
And he stayed in touch with me year after year after year. And in fact, the day that I joined Core, I just happened to be talking to him, right? And we were just having a regular conversation. And I said, oh, well, hey, man, I'm about to walk in somewhere. And he goes, oh, yeah, cool. No problem. He goes, I about to jump off too. I got to interview a guy we're hiring for the Carolinas. And again, just one of those things. I don't know really what happened, but like, and he's asked me over the years, like, hey, would you be interested in this? But for whatever reason, not a good time or whatever. And I just said, what about me? And then he goes, well, if you're serious, like, I won't even go do that call. Like, if you want to do it. And then all of a sudden I just felt like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try it.
So what's your role then?
Yeah. So, territory manager. Initially when I started there, I had the Carolinas. And then since then I picked up Tennessee and picked up Kentucky.
Okay.
So now I have that region right there. And, we have two parts of the business, direct and distributor. And so from a direct standpoint, I work with the bigger gym operations, all the like Division I universities and everything.
Yeah.
And then our dealer network, I manage them, but they primarily work in things like multi-housing, residential, municipalities like parks and recs and fire department, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we have we wear two hats. We manage the distribution side, and then I work directly with customers.
Okay. So now give me some of the features of Core Fitness. Like what is, what's the state of fitness? What are you guys pushing out? What's popular?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Tell them how many brands that Core.
Yeah.
Because they probably, Core, you may go, I never heard of them.
No.
But it's like, yeah, but they're 100%. The parent company.
Yeah. No, it's exactly what I was going to say. Everywhere I ever go or place I go, and I say I'm with Core Health and Fitness, and a lot of times I'll get like kind of like a blank stare, right? And then I'll say like, well, have you ever heard of Nautilus? And they go, oh yeah, Nautilus, yeah. I go, okay, that's our brand. That's our strength brand, right? Or Stairmaster, Schwinn, right? Even if you were a little kid, you probably remember a Schwinn bike, right?
Yeah.
So now there's Schwinn cycling. We have Star Track, which is our main floor cardio, like treadmills, ellipticals, those kind of things. And then about 5 years ago, before I came on board, the company acquired Throwdown. And Throwdown is more of like what fits in the category of like rigs, racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, everything like that. Functional, yeah. And it originated out of MMA.
Yeah.
And so then they kind of started developing products and programs and everything from there. So yeah, we say right now, I mean, we cover every corner of the gym, right? So whether it's main floor cardio, high intensity cardio, strength, all different types of strength, and indoor cycling, and then functional.
Do you find one to be more popular than the other, or that's been completely offset over the years that you've seen it?
But that's a great segue and a great question of like what's going on in the industry right now.
Yeah.
And so if we I think it'll be more clear if we back up just a little bit, but if we go back, like when I first opened the Rush, there was no functional training.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was coming right on the edge of where gyms before that were doing a lot of stuff like racquetball and there wasn't a lot of cardio or anything like that, right? And it was basically racquetball and bodybuilding type stuff was what was going on, right?
Yep.
And those are the gyms that I grew up in as a young kid, right? And then you start coming up, and then comes this birth of treadmills and ellipticals and all these things like that. So in 2000, when we opened the gym, it was really clear. You had 4 components to your gym. You had cardio, you had like free weights and plate loaded, you had selectorized, and then you had group X, like group fitness. So all the different rooms for your classes and stuff. Okay. And like that was the blueprint. Don't steer away from that. Okay. So we start opening and we get to around 2006, 2007, and then in the background, you see something like CrossFit starting to grow, but it's weird. It's warehouse. You have to be crazy, whatever, right?
Yep.
It hasn't come mainstream yet. Okay. And then you're starting to see these real boutique-y type things starting to come up, like very high-end yoga, very high-end stuff like that. And these worlds are starting to come up like this, right? And then you're starting to see the membership industry starting to change, where gyms started going down to like $10 or $20 or whatever, right? So the landscape all around like a big box like Rush or whatever is all starting to change all around it. studios are opening, CrossFits are opening, high volume, low price is opening.
Yeah.
And you're all of a sudden you're going like, well, man, what are we going to do?
And this
Yeah.
is 2006, 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when it's just starting to like happen.
Yeah.
Right. So, one of our things at Rush that we were very, very successful with was personal training. I mean, we really set the industry standard. We set a lot of standards of how that should look and run and profitability and all that kind of stuff. And then right around that time, the board of directors and people, a little bit after that, when they come on board, they start saying like, well, hey, how can you increase the revenue? And I'm going like, I mean, I'm like, I feel like we're tapped out. I mean, we're selling as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went around and I did some due diligence to some of our team. And I was like, what are the number one reasons why you lose a client? And they said, well, normally it's financial. Okay. And then at the same time, though, we always had trainers that were, hey, how can I make more money?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So all of a sudden you start to see a dichotomy that how do I save the customer money and pay the employee more at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So and keep the shareholders happy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So all of a sudden I'm sitting there, I'm going like, oh man,
This is not good.
yeah. It's like a Seinfeld was something like that one time. But anyway, so I was like, man, how do I do this? And nobody was doing group training yet. And so I asked this one trainer, she was a rock star. I said, hey, how you train every hour, you're booked every hour, right? You can't possibly fit another client. I go, what would happen if like 2 or 3 or 4 of them could jump into 1 hour? And she was from Croatia and just real hard. She's like, they'll do what I tell them to do. And I was like, let's try it. So she got 4 people. They all jumped into 1 hour. And then that opened up 3 more hours for her to take single clients again, right?
Yeah.
So, they were paying whatever at the time, X dollars a session. I said, okay, what if I could bring their price point down 20%, right? I could put 4 of them in 1 hour, and then I could pay you more, and then the company would be more profitable all at the same time. Would you guys be on board for that? They looked at me, they're like, yeah, we want to do that.
Yeah.
And it just started to take off. One trainer, and then people saw her, and they're like, well, why is she getting to do that? Why is she making more money? Why are her clients say? I'm like, you can do it too.
So that sort of took off group fitness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's where this gets really, wires start to get really tangled here. So then they're coming to me and they're going like, we need room. We got the gym is packed full of machines everywhere, right? And they go, we need room to do our thing. We want to do, it's like not a place you could swing a kettlebell because someone was like walking right
Yep.
by you, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and remember, no rigs, none of that stuff exists yet.
Yeah.
So right now it's super easy. Well, why don't you just go get a rig, function? They weren't there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went to the owner and I said, hey, let me do this. I need room. And we had like 5 lines of selectorized equipment at that time. The pin loaded.
Sure.
equipment.
Yep.
I go, let me sell one of these and let me create some space and let me take that money and let me buy some toys. Let me buy some kettlebells and some other things like that. He's like, all right, you can do it. And so I started trying it in one club and it started to really take off. And then of course, anytime you start getting something with business that takes off, then they want you to do more of it.
Sure.
So then I sold another line. And then, but then I realized too, I was having to makeshift these areas. I would go and take like what do you call it? Like the captain's chair, like, with leg raises. I bring that over here. I bring this over here. And I was starting to makeshift this stuff. And at that time, with no rigs or anything like that, I thought, I need to make something that has all this so I don't have to keep bringing it out and putting it back. So we had a member at the gym that owned a steel shop, right? And I said, hey, do you think, and I'm no engineer, guys. I sketched this out on a piece of paper. I said, do you think you could make me something that does this?
Yeah.
And he's like, country dude. He's like, yeah, man, we do that. So like, all right, comes in. First one we ever made, like 4 posts, connected at the top, like a square.
Yeah.
And I wanted to put like a dip station on one, a step station on the other. I wanted to be able to put, I don't even remember, Renegade on one, you know?
Well, there was one. It was over in the location over here off Kingston Pike, Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That came later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So remember, none of this has ever been seen before.
Yeah.
And we put the monkey bars across and
Yeah.
everything, and every iteration just got a little better.
Yeah.
Right. And then I had the playground to test everything in, because I could just drop it in a rush.
Yeah.
And put battle ropes on it and put other things on it and just, do you like it? Do you not like it? Like, what's going on? And so all of a sudden it started to gain momentum. And there were two other guys that were involved that were helping me with this. And one of the guys, he had kind of invented like a TRX type of, like a suspension trainer.
Okay.
But it was way more advanced. It had a pulley system on it and all this stuff like that. And he was looking for something to hang his trainers on.
Okay.
Right? So I go, yeah, let's put them on here. Let's see how it goes. More and more momentum. So that year coming up, URSA's coming up, which I think was the year of 2008 URSA show.
Okay.
Okay, and that's the big trade show in the industry. Super people fly in from all over the world to go to this thing. And we convinced a company called Perform Better to let us, a couple dudes from Tennessee, put it in their booth. And they're like, yeah, well, you have to take care of it. You get it there, you build it, you do everything. We'll give you like this much space.
Yeah.
We put it in, and guys, I'm not kidding you. The entire industry changed that day.
Yeah.
There was a line around their booth. Pictures, I mean, it went crazy. No one had seen monkey bars and all these different
And I
stations.
apologize if I missed this. What year?
I think it was 08.
2008? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And we had been kind of in the lab messing around with this for probably about 6 years, right around, or 2 years, 2006, 2007, 2008. And we put it in, and it just went nuts.
Wow.
Yeah. And, a lot of people back then, they're like, well, why didn't you patent it? I'm like, you can't patent like a steel playground. Any change to, you'd have to have like 1,000 patents to make it hold up, right? And then instantly the industry saw that. And then the next year there was like 6 of those things at the show.
Yeah.
And then the next year there was like 20 of them. And then by the next year, every single person made one, every brand.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we kept kind of playing around with it. We created it as just like a separate hobby company that we had.
Yeah.
And I was just designing them. And so where Ring of Fire came from was actually, the name came from the guy who was the original owner of the Rush. And he had said, he had noticed what was going on with our group training and what we were doing. And I had been telling him about, like, I'm designing this one that's shaped like an octagon. And then one of his strengths, he's very imaginative. He's like, Ring of Fire. You need to call it the Ring of Fire. And I was like, fire? He's like, yeah, fire. And then we literally, you saw it on it. It's laser cut into the thing. It says Ring of Fire on it. And so, yeah, we had those there. And then a lot of dealer distributors started selling them all over the country. And so even to this day, I quit doing it around... I kept selling them all the way through till around 2018 or something like that. And then it got to be too hard. It's just like a one guy in steel shop, with some guys, just making them. And then of course everyone was making them by that time. So our niche for all those years was that we did them custom. Any color, any logo, anything. That the big guys can't do that. Mm-hmm. The big guys that can't stop the conveyor belt to put, to change something, right? So yeah, I did it all the way up to around 2018, and to this day, because a lot of dealers sold them, I sold them to the dealer, and then they went out from there. I didn't know where they actually went. Yeah. Right. And to this day, I'll get, even just 2 weeks ago, I got a picture from somebody in a gym in New York. And he sent a picture. He goes, was this yours? And I looked at it. I go, oh, yeah, I remember doing that one. Yeah. Yeah. Or I'll walk into a gym, Kentucky, Charleston, South Carolina. I'll go somewhere, and I'll go, oh, I remember that one. And sometimes I'm like, oh man, that was not a good one, or because we evolved every time.
Yeah.
The first ones were, you know, we were still learning. Ring of Fire was still early on in the process. So yeah, we just, but yeah, it's just crazy to me to think back to that timeline. But yeah, to wrap up back to your question, all of a sudden that instead of those 4 phases of the gym with the cardio, strength, plate loaded, free weight, and then selectorized, and then group fitness, now there had to become 5: functional, turf, all that. Okay, but it's still the same building, right? How do I make the building accommodate? You have to start getting rid of stuff. So other parts of the pie started getting slimming down, right? And then now you're even stuff like rowers, air bikes, things like that are now part of your main floor cardio.
Yeah.
Early on, they were just over there in the turf.
Yeah.
Now they're right here and everything. And so the landscape is drastically changing, right? So from even, let's use the analogy of a wave, right? Everyone's been to the beach.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes whether you're body surfing or you're surfing or whatever, you look out and you see a wave. And have you ever thought, like, is this going to be a big wave? And like one of those ones that blows you all the way back to the thing?
Yeah.
Or is this going to be, a little wave? Something looks like it's going to take off and then it doesn't,
Fizzles
right?
out,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're watching these trends, right? I remember there was this one, it was like a surfboard that you were going to stand on and do some stuff with. And it looked like it was going to go like this, and then it went, it never took off, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you've got these tried and true things that just keep cycling back, right? And right now, we are in what I would call probably the second biggest strength phase in the history of the gym industry right now.
Okay.
Right now. So cardio's is actually downsized a little bit, especially like the elliptical category and stuff like that. Treadmills are still very busy. Stairmaster's very, very busy, right? Step mill, treadmill.
Tony, I think that's awesome, man. Like,
You like that?
That's a super cool idea, and I think that mirrors a lot of our the research
Yeah.
that's come out these days. I
Yeah.
think that's very reminiscent of a lot of the studies that we see. I also think that we're going to have to call a segue and like a timeout, and maybe have a
Yeah.
round 2
Hey, whatever you guys want.
of what that
sure.
needs to look like. I think that's a perfect stopping point.
Yeah,
where we
whatever you
can,
guys want.
Well,
start in-
Stairmaster, I don't think you mentioned that. That's
Yeah.
another core company. Did you?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is pretty interesting, like how it ebbs and flows, and it's cool that
Yeah.
we're in this kind of strength phase,
massive.
and
Massive.
functional fitness. So it's a
Yeah.
cool time in fitness.
Talking about like 3 times the sales of like even just a few years before.
Wow.
Triple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more meat on that bone.
Yeah.
for sure.
Tony, let's pick it up on a round 2.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming
Thank
out,
you.
Dusty. Thank you for your time
Yeah,
as always.
appreciate it.
And we'll pick it up back with strength
There you go.
in the industry.
Yeah, you got it.